Okay, just let me know
Okay,
when. Okay, are we good?
Yes, yes, we're ready now. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry
Thank you.
about
All right, everyone. Savita, you hearing an echo?
I am not hearing an echo, sir.
Okay.
Are
Good.
you?
I was, but not now.
Good
All right.
afternoon, everybody. I apologize for my tardiness.
Oh, Margaret, we're just starting. So we had a little technical glitch, not to worry. So we're just getting started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is 3:02 on Tuesday, January 11th. I'm Sonny Garza, co-chair of the Livable Places Action Committee, and I officially call this meeting to order as a virtual meeting using Microsoft Teams. At this committee meeting, public speakers may speak up to 2 minutes when called on during the time designated at the end of the agenda. Please mute yourself and turn off your camera during the meeting. That will help with our broadcast and streaming quality. If you're joining us via telephone, be aware that you need to use the *6 button to mute and unmute yourself. The mute button itself will not work. And committee members, if you would like to speak during the meeting, please use the raise your hand feature or unmute and state your last name so that you can be recognized by the chair. Committee members, please prepare to answer the roll call by unmuting yourself. When I call your name, please just mark that you are here or present. So Sonny Garza, the co-chair, is present. Lisa Clark, the co-chair, is not present. Andy Tees. Andy Tees?
Yes, I'm here.
Is present. Thank you, sir. Curtis Davis.
Curtis Davis is present.
Curtis Davis is present. Dr. Sherry Smith. Dr. Smith is not present. Sean Masick. Sean Masick is not present. Fernando Zamaripa. Fernando Zamaripa is not present. Jeff, hello. Jeff Kaplan. Jeff Kaplan is not present. Kathy Payton.
Kathy Payton is present, but will need to excuse myself at 4 p.m.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll be close to done there, Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kirby Liu. Kirby Liu is not present. Lloyd Smith. Lloyd Smith is not present. Luis Guajardo. Luis Guajardo is not present. Megan Sigler.
Sigler present.
Megan Sigler is present. Thank you. Melissa Fontenot. Melissa Fontenot is not present. Mike Dishberger.
Present.
Mike Dishberger is present. Neil Dykeman. Neil Dykeman is not present. Omar Isfar.
Omar Isfar present.
Omar Isfar is present. Peter Friedman.
Peter Friedman present.
Peter Friedman is present. Sandy Stevens. Sandy Stevens is not present. Scott Kubler. Scott Kubler is not present. Steve Curry.
Curry, present.
Steve Curry is present. Toby Cole. Toby Cole is not present. Tyron McDaniel.
Tyron McDaniel is present.
Tyron McDaniel is present. Thank you. Johanna Mahmoud. Johanna
Mahmoud present.
is present. Thank you. Zion Escobar.
Zion Escobar is present.
Zion Escobar is present. All right, for those of you whose name I called or who are just joining the meeting, if you are a subcommittee member and joined without hearing your name called, please identify yourself now. All right, hearing none, we'll move forward. I show 11 subcommittee members in attendance. So just a quick virtual meeting instructions for participating in today's meeting. At the meeting, as I said, please stay muted with your camera off. If you wish to speak, enter your name into the chat, and your name will be called in the order received. That is for people who are attending this meeting, not subcommittee members. Again, use the raise your hand or speak out and say your name. If you're using a cell phone, use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. If you sign up to speak in the chat, the chair will call you at the end of the meeting. Spell your last name out loud unless the staff does that for you. Again, this is a verbal recording, so make sure that you speak slowly and succinctly. The chat may not be used for anything other than public speaker requests or basic staff information. So again, if you want to speak at the end of the meeting, put your name in there. Or if you need to contact staff, put your name and contact information in there. Again, the raise your hand feature is for committee members only. Public comments will be heard verbally at the end of the meeting. Please disconnect or hang up all devices at the end of the meeting. All right, now I will turn this meeting over to Margaret Wallace-Brown for the director's report. Margaret.
Thank you, Chairman Sonny Garza. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn my camera on for a moment. Good afternoon, co-chairs and Livable Places Action Committee. Welcome to 2022 with the Planning Department. We are very excited about the next year's worth of work we have for you. This is going to be a lively discussion today and will continue to be through this year as we try to update our development code to reflect the needs of our community and expand the variety and the price points of homes that are available for Houstonians. First of all, my name is Margaret Wallace-Brown. I'm the director of the Planning and Development Department. I have a couple brief updates. We were asked last month for an update on the residential buffering work that you had done earlier in the committee work. And we have spent several months working with the Public Works Department, the Solid Waste Department, the Technical Advisory Committee, Technical Advisory Group, the TAG group that we've compiled with a variety of departments in the city structure, as well as some of our stakeholders, and have what we think is a pretty good proposal based on your recommendations to us. We are working closely with the legal department to start working on some red line language. We know that you want to see the red lines. That theory is that you're beyond theory at this point, and you'd like to see things on paper. And so as soon as we've got some red line drafts back from the legal department, we'll be able to start sharing them and doing some community engagement beyond you on that. So residential buffering and screening is moving forward. I also want to spend a moment talking with you about conservation districts. We've done essentially the same type of thing with a different series of stakeholders on conservation districts, and have a pretty good idea of how we want to move it forward. Again, we're talking with the legal department, trying to get some ink on paper so that we have some specifics to talk with you about, and believe that in February, we'll be able to have details for you. So those are the two big things that you've already talked about that have left your hands for the time being, that will come back to you at some point in the future. I also want to say that we've got a residential survey summary. As you recall, we took a survey several months ago on a variety of issues for residential development. We will post the results of that survey. We have a summary. Thousands of people answered the survey, and we are so grateful for the response that we got. More people being able to respond, more people paying attention to this committee is always helpful. And so it took us a while to go through that and to summarize it. We will have it up on the Livable Places Action Committee website by the end of this week, so you can go there and look at it. That is everything I plan to update with you. If you've got additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. But if you've got any questions for the planning department, you know, you can always get us at houstonplanning.com or call us directly at 832-393-6600. Thank you. That ends my report.
Thank you, Director Wallace-Brown. All right. From here on in, we'll go further into the presentation with Suvita Bandy. Suvita.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Suvita Bandy, Planning Department staff, and wish you all a very happy new year. So we are going to get started in the new year with this project. So I'm sharing my screen right now. Are you all able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the agenda today, we are going to talk about the benefits of compact development. And then we will take questions. And after that, we will go through the recommendations for multiple units on unrestricted lots, the topic that we have discussed starting from May to I think about September. We spent time discussing and going over some of the regulations and meeting with technical advisory group. So we will go those recommendations and then take questions after that. Here is a timeline of what we have accomplished so far, and I appreciate the committee's input and work on this. This is our 15th meeting, and we are making very good progress. With that, to talk about the benefits of compact development, I would like to invite Colin Scarf. So, Colin, you're here?
Yep, just turning on everything. Hello, everybody. As Savita said, my name is Colin Scarf. I'm with the firm Code Studio, and we're based in Austin, Texas, and we've been helping Savita think through some of these issues. And so I'm going to just kind of continue the conversation from last month where we talked about some of the benefits of walkable development and kind of transition that to talk a little bit about compact development and why the city should be encouraging more compact development patterns that focus on infill and redevelopment versus kind of developing on the edge of the city. Next slide, please. So we've organized this presentation into 3 parts. Part 1, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge facing the city and the region today in terms of growth. Part 2, what are some of the benefits of compact development? Why does the city care about compact development? Why do we care about compact development? And then kind of part 3, what are the elements? What are the things? What things are needed in order to accommodate compact development? So next slide, please. So Houston and the region is growing, and it will continue to grow. The challenge becomes as more and more people move into the city and the region, where are these people going to live? Where are they going to work? Where will they play? And how are they going to move around? Next slide, please. So the city and the region is experiencing some changes in kind of the demographic makeup of the city. Household size is decreasing, not dramatically, but households are getting smaller, and average household size is less in the city than it is in the county. So we're also seeing changes in the types of households as well. So all of this information here on this slide and the next slide was put together by the Kinder Institute in their recent report on the state of housing in Houston and Harris County. So if you get a chance, you should check that out. It's another really good report. But fundamentally, if you could go backwards, the renter households in the city of Houston increased by approximately 30,000. Whereas homeowner households, which are typically larger, decreased by 2,000 households between 2018 and 2019. In Harris County, renter households increased by, it says 34,000 here, but the Harris County numbers include the Houston numbers. So in a sense, renter households only increased by about 5,000 in the county. So most of the renter household growth is happening within the city. So this is kind of a fascinating change in demographics. So we're also seeing changes in kind of the family and living arrangements within the county and the city. So this is kind of the most stark change that we're seeing is this single parent change. So single parent households dropped in both the city and the county. That's kind of a national trend that's happening. I'm not necessarily sure why that's happening, but this could be due to a number of reasons, such as decline in birth rates and a shift to people living with partners, or just simply how they choose to define their households moving forward. So what we're seeing here is another interesting gain in the city of Houston gained approximately 25,000 single person households between 2018 and 2019. So what we're seeing is that non-traditional households, so by non-traditional, I mean kind of non-family, single parent and living alone households in the city of Houston grew at 3 times the rate of what we might consider traditional households in the city of Houston. So non-traditional households are growing faster in the city. So the days of kind of the traditional household, the married couple household in the city of Houston is declining. In the county, it only gained about 3,000 single person households. And then non-traditional households grew at 2 times that of traditional married couple households. So it's still growing faster than married couple households, even in the county. Next slide. So, and from a land consumption perspective, Houston's growth is still focused on the edges of the city where land is cheaper. And so this comes from the Resilient Houston report. But so for every single family building permit issued within the city limits, 4 more are issued in the ETJ. That's just an interesting statistic. So sprawling land use and development patterns are more expensive to build and more expensive to maintain than more compact development. So rather than encouraging urban sprawl, the city needs to find new ways to integrate more compact development into existing neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So why should the city be encouraging compact development? What are the benefits of compact development and infill instead of focusing on the edges of the city? Next slide, please. And then next slide. So from a purely fiscal perspective, building and expanding new roads is expensive. Providing services to new development on the edges of the city is also expensive. So providing utilities, providing jobs out there, providing services is expensive. Providing police service, fire service, EMS service on the edges of the city can be expensive. Simply maintaining what the city already has is hard enough. So maintaining the street network, maintaining sidewalks, maintaining bike lanes, maintaining roads, highways, the list can go on, is expensive. And then fundamentally, car culture in itself is expensive. It's expensive to own a car, and then there are social cost implications of owning a car as well. Next slide, please. So compact development can help support schools. This is a map of population changes from 2010 to 2017 at the elementary school level. And so what you're seeing here is inner city schools are losing school-age children. Families are moving further and further out where housing costs are cheaper. So what you're seeing here is the darker colors are showing the higher changes in school populations. So these darker colors are where more school-age children are moving to between 2010 and 2017. So what you're seeing here in the core of the city where the colors are lighter, they are losing school-age children from the school system. And this is at the elementary level. Next slide. And then this is also happening, at the middle school age, and it's probably more dramatic at the middle school. And then I haven't shown it here, but this is a similar pattern that's probably happening in the high school setting as well. Next slide. So new development on the edges of city can lead to the loss of valuable natural habitat or open space. Land that was once farmland or open fields is now a shopping center or a subdivision. This can lead to more impervious cover and more runoff that damages streams, bayous, and lakes. It can lead to more reliance on cars to get around, more and more driving, which can lead to reduced air quality, more greenhouse gases, and just crazier and crazier weather patterns as the earth heats up. Next slide, please. So compact development leads to more efficient development in theory, with more people living in less land area. having more people living together is a good thing. More people living together should mean a greater variety of people interacting with one another. People from different backgrounds with different perspectives, with different income levels is a good thing that we want to encourage at the city. Houston is very diverse, but it's still very segregated. So if you look at this dot map, this is from Resilient Houston, but I think you can get this from the web. I think it's like the racial.map.com or something like that. But what you're seeing here, each dot represents 100 people. Then each colored dot equals a race or ethnicity. And so when you're looking kind of on the east side of Houston or the northeast of Houston, you're seeing a lot of green dots down here, which would mean it's mostly black. And then if you're looking on the west, you're seeing more blue dots. So it is a very diverse city, but it is still very segregated. And so foreign-born and Asian populations are actually now decreasing in the city of Houston. So, if the goal is to create more diverse neighborhoods with a variety of people with different backgrounds, then we need to really focus on compact development. And ultimately, simply having more people means more support for local businesses. So different types of restaurants, different types of shops, different varieties of places for people to visit and go to. Next slide, please. So with more people come better support for the transit system. Houston has an excellent transit system. So the more people that we can be living closer to the center of the community, the more support there will be for that excellent transit system. Next slide. And then the more people that we have living in the city, the better support there is for the bike and pedestrian system that is growing in the city of Houston. So next slide, please. So there's a kind of train of thought, right, that with more people comes more congestion. Well, this isn't necessarily true. So as more and more people move into the city, they have a tendency to live in more dense housing options. So for example, in multifamily units tend to own less cars per household than single family units. This could be just because, if you live in a denser setting, you don't necessarily need to own a car as much as you would if you live further out in the city in more of a single family subdivision. There's access to transit, there's bike lanes, there's better walking options. So ultimately, this can lead to less traffic and less traffic congestion. Next slide, please. And so kind of last but not least, there's kind of the housing issue. So in order to have more compact development, you have to have more compact housing options. So it's important to note here that Livable Places is focused on small scale multifamily and small lot single family options. We're not necessarily focused on kind of high-rise apartment development. So as more and more people move into the city, these kind of missing middle housing options become more natural and feasible as smaller, more diverse households are looking for a variety of places to live. The kind of traditional 2,000 square foot single family house or townhouse may no longer be the kind of preferred housing choice in the future. People are looking for options that fit their lifestyle choice and income level, whether it's an ADU in someone's backyard or a duplex or a fourplex or a cottage court. Housing diversity is definitely a benefit of compact development. Next slide, please. Smaller and different types of units help share and reduce the overall cost of housing for an individual and for everyone. This makes smaller units and different types of housing units more attainable to a greater variety of people. This is a good thing. And so from a kind of a overall tax perspective, the more efficient use of land, so the more units that you put on a lot, can lead to higher taxable value of land, which is a good thing. So generally, infill and compact development will pay higher taxes. This can help reduce the tax burden for the rest of the city. So it's all well and good kind of talking about the benefits of compact development. but you need to have certain things and certain elements in place in order to make compact development feasible and supported by people in general. Next slide, please. So you have to have good design. So we kind of talked about that last month. So with density, with compact development, you've got to have good design. So buildings have to address the street. They have to be pulled up to the streets. And in general, it has to be a walkable place. Next slide. You have to have access to transit. So we kind of mentioned that earlier, right? So having a good transit system in place is essential for compact development. Next slide. Having walking and biking options for compact development is essential. So people don't have to rely on cars as much. Having a mix of uses is essential as well. Not necessarily a mix of uses on one site, but a mix of uses in a neighborhood is essential. So you've got to have places to walk and bike to in order to support compact development. And you've got to have housing choice. We've got to have more than just kind of the traditional 2,000 square foot single family house or townhouse or you know, really tall apartment building. People are moving to the city and they're looking for different housing choices that they can afford that suit their lifestyle. So we have to make sure that we're delivering that housing product to them so that at a variety of housing points. Next slide. As more and more people move into the city, you've got to have appropriate infrastructure in place to support those people that are moving into the city. Next slide. You got to have outdoor space. So when you're putting more people together, they've got to have places that they can go outside and exercise and recreate and just simply enjoying the outside. You've got to have cultural facilities, libraries, museums, places for people to stimulate their minds. And then as you get more and more people living together, you're going to have additional need for social services. And that's it. Thank you. Do you want to do some questions, Savita?
Yes, so committee members, we are ready for any questions you may have on this portion of the presentation. We want to give a break before we do a long presentation, so wanted to get any thoughts you may have.
All right, so committee members, again, you just heard Colin and Savita, and we're talking about, so that the topics, right, we'd like your commentary on is everything from design to transit to walkability to mixed use, housing choices, infrastructure, parks, culture, and social services. In the last couple of meetings, we really have been talking a lot about, you know, housing choices and, you know, its inherent walkability if it's done correctly. So any commentary or questions that you might have, we would appreciate at this moment.
Mr. McDaniel's hand is raised first, and then Mr. Curtis.
Mr. McDaniel, go right ahead, sir. Unmute if you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you go.
You know, one of the things that we see in our practice that was alluded to in some of the findings was the difference in the composition of families and their makeup and how that leads into the housing choices that we should make available in the marketplace. And so we are in a situation where a lot of the properties we do, not as much on our new construction, but specifically with our renovation projects we do, we're finding a lot of single person households or maybe two houses. That also speaks to the point of the decreasing membership in our inner city schools, because a lot of the people we service, probably 55% of the homeowners we service within the 610 corridor don't have kids and or single household. And so being able to offer different housing types that are in these areas that are walkable, that are accessible, that have access to these accoutrements that are important to having a sustained community are really key. And it's something we see in our practice on a daily basis.
All right, thank you. I believe Mr. Davis is next.
Yes, my question or comment goes to the scope of our effort. A lot of what Colin just presented requires coordination across policy that deals with not just what we enable or allow, but it also deals with public investment priorities. It deals with policy around affordable housing development. That is how you set priorities and make that known so that the development community can plan and take advantage of that. How do we see the work that we're doing, which I understand to be primarily focused on what we will allow, what we will enable, versus what you're describing, Colin, which requires multi-sectoral facilitation? That is, there are a number of things that need to come together to allow or facilitate the type of compact development you're describing.
Colin, maybe Savita would be in a better position to answer or illuminate that, since she's been having meetings with various and sundry city departments. Savita?
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's a great comment. You are right in saying that there is need for coordination, and within the city, we are definitely doing our best to coordinate and make sure that whatever is possible, we are able to, and we are coordinating to make sure the goals are lining up. We want to make sure that the reason we did the benefits of compact development is we want everybody who is on the committee and listening to this conversation has to understand how important it is. And it is for the future of the city to focus on compact developments and to see what we can do to take the city in the right direction. So yes, there could be some things that we may not be able to control at this point, but if you have that in the background while you're thinking about this, I think that is more important while we frame the solutions or the recommendations. That was the purpose of putting this presentation together.
Okay, Mr. Davis, did you have anything else? Did that answer your question?
It answered my question to a point, and that was the limits of allowing something versus facilitating something to happen. And are we going to be in a position to make a charge or make clear through the mayor's office, through the building departments we're already doing with permitting, through the financing community, that is the city influenced investment vehicles, the public ownership of land and transfer to land and priorities for certain uses. Essentially, we're talking about a strategic plan to facilitate these things. And because I like it and I want to enable it so a developer can do it, doesn't mean it's going to make it happen, because there's so many other drivers in the production side of the market that, all of the good regulatory policy in the world doesn't allow this to happen. And do we have case examples of cities that have moved from some position like where we are to this nirvana of coordination? That I know Atlanta has done a few things. They're certainly not in any nirvana, but they do have some efforts in that direction. Can Colin or Savita, can you speak to that? I just don't want to feel like we're flailing at windmills, or we're saying, okay, this is great enablement, but the developers are sitting here going, yeah, right.
Well, Colin, before you jump in, I just want to make clear that one of the things that we have been talking about in putting together this month's presentation is where are the incentives to the development community? As you said, if we don't incent, it's one thing to change the rules. We need to make sure that there are financial incentives to make sure that the development community embraces these changes and takes them forward. So I can assure you that is something that we're talking about. I know I sent an article to Savita and the staff about San Diego and specifically California. They have taken down all the restrictions for accessory dwelling units, which it's like, wow, you've gone from, from 0 to 100. So, and San Diego is doing something similar. So yes, we are looking at those things as well. Colin or Savita, I didn't know if you wanted to answer Mr. Davis or wrap that up for him.
I just wanted to say that there are a lot of cities who are looking towards the missing middle housing and changing rules to accommodate the missing middle. Portland, California, there are a lot of different places, a lot of different cities are reducing significantly the parking regulations. Also, to make sure that there is room for homes rather than focus on a large number of parking spaces. So yes, there are a lot of cities who are doing that, and we are using those as we prepare the recommendations, and the thought process is there. So that's what we were trying to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to set the framework here so everybody's kind of on the same page and we're all headed in the same direction, and so that, hopefully everything that we're doing, to the extent all the city departments, we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And we're setting the stage here for what we're trying to achieve. For comparing Houston to other cities isn't easy. We all know why, right? Primarily because of zoning. And so everything seems to be in Houston. You've got to think differently about everything in order to achieve stuff that, a lot of cities are doing with zoning. So from that perspective, it's hard. And we're also in Texas, which, has a different perspective in how it relates to regulations, especially when you compare it to the state of California.
Right. So Mr. Davis, yes, we've got our work cut out for us, but I want to make sure that you and the other committee members understand that we're not doing this work in a vacuum. We are reaching out, like I'm going to be calling Mike Dishberger in a moment, but we are reaching out to the development community, getting their input to make sure that what we're doing does in fact act as an incentive, is viable, is sellable for them. So I can assure you whether we'll achieve that goal remains to be seen, but that is our aim.
Well, it leads directly into what Savita is going to talk about in the next portion of the presentation.
Okay. All right. Well, let me call on Scott Kubler. Scott? Scott,
trying to unmute myself. Thank you for that.
Okay, go right ahead.
Interesting presentation. The representative for the Super Neighborhood Alliance, and last night we had our monthly meeting, and we were fortunate enough to have the mayor present. And in the question and answer session, which lasted about an hour, no less than 5 different people addressed the issue associated with noise, interfering with their ability to be able to enjoy their household and giving additional compact development needs. If you haven't heard it from the mayor, you're going to hear it from the mayor because it was such a prevalent conversation about how noise is impacted. And then when you talked about infrastructure, I'm really kind of interested as to not the fact that we need to address the infrastructure, but how you would go about addressing the infrastructure, because giving detention and sheet flow associated with floodwaters is a huge thing for development purposes. I live what used to be Pinecrest golf course out in Spring Branch, and that is constantly a discussion based on the quantities and how fast things move and the impacts associated with that. And it seems that, yes, we need to incentivize people to be able to do development, but we need to make sure that we're not negatively impacting development that has already occurred 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, because we haven't addressed the infrastructure that goes along with it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those things. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Anyone want to speak to this question? I know that in the past we have basically looked at noise, especially construction noise, as being entirely like out of our hands, out of the hands of this department. But
My apologies. Not construction noise.
Oh,
based on the way you do development, it's the use of the space that was the issue.
So it's density.
It's the bars. So as you do development, what you were talking about is we want walkable communities. We want things nearby. but those communities also bring and create enterprises that create noise that make it difficult to enjoy your property.
That is very, very true, sir. Yeah, we all know about Washington and all that. Yes. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn. Again, because we don't have zoning, that is, frankly, always going to be an issue. Scott, how long have you lived here in Houston?
This go round has been 7 years. And
okay.
When I was here before I joined the Marine Corps 100 million years ago, I was here so I've been in Houston off and on for about 15 years. Okay,
I got you beat, because I've been here for about 30 years. But what's interesting is, and I think those of you who are slightly older can tell you that, like right now, Washington used to be in the Montrose, and before it was in the Montrose, it was on Richmond, between Chimney Rock. And so what happens is, the commercial, restaurants and bars all look for the next hot place. They're coming over here to Edo now. But why? Because the real estate is cheap. And so the lack of zoning really makes this problem for ourselves. So right now,
it's what the mayor said last night.
I understand perfectly. So anyway, I didn't know, Colin, if you and Savita want to speak to that. I don't know that we have a solution at all to address that today.
This is Director Wallace Brown. Can I jump in for a moment? Because I was on the call
please,
last
Margaret.
night.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I heard all of it, and it is a continued challenge with noise in neighborhoods, and we recognize that. And as we start to talk about compact development, what we understand is that living closer together does in fact, bring challenges that when you're in a single family residential neighborhood without any commercial except on the very perimeter, you don't have. The challenge is that, we're trying to find the balance in our code that encourages infill development and encourages a 15-minute city that doesn't degrade existing neighborhoods, and the balance is there. The balance can be found. We're we're hopeful that we can accomplish some of this. I do know that we do have a pretty weak noise ordinance, and the mayor recognized that last night. And there has been some conversation about strengthening it. I don't know where that would go. It's certainly not within my area of expertise. It's not in my lane, so to speak. But the purpose of this committee is to explore all of these competing interests. Might not be the right term, but that's the best one I can come up with right now, that contribute to either an improved or a degraded quality of life for Houstonians. And your expertise and your opinions are what's so valuable and what will get us to the point of the balance that we strive for.
I appreciate that, and your comments are in line with the I think things that we need to address, and that's why I included the infrastructure. And the other one that I didn't address, but I think is pertinent, is that we look at city services. As you know, man, because you were on the call last night, the garbage was a big issue, and the more compact we make environments, the greater the density of garbage issues we're going to have to deal with.
No, well, so the counter to that is the more compacted environment we have, the easier it is to pick up garbage. Compact cities provide services in a much more efficient way than spread out cities. And so I know I see you're smiling at me, and that you're not agreeing with what I'm saying.
Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, a person with an experience is never at the mercy of somebody with a theory. Before I moved here, I worked in Washington, D.C. And before that, I lived in Manhattan for 10 years. So I have experience of living in compact environments, but I also understand the impacts on city services associated with compact dwelling and what happens with it. And so to talk about the noise issue, I lived in New York City and heard people going down the highways, the FDR, at 2:00 in the morning, just because of the nature of living there. So I'm excited about what we're trying to do in this committee, and I love the conversations we have here. I'm just trying to make sure that as the Super Neighborhood Alliance, I'm bringing the things to the table that have been discussed amongst our membership to be able to say, let's make sure we address these issues.
And that's exactly why you are here. Thank you.
All right. Mike, Mike Dishberger, are you there?
Yes, I am. Very,
You are
very
next,
good
sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good conversation. We are kind of lucky here. I saw the little dots on there with schools out there, and some of them are increasing. We've noticed lately we get a lot more people with very young kids, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, moving into the city again. So that's a good sign. I love that. I'm a native Houstonian. I was part of the Westheimer group at one time, and it's moved to Washington. It's going to Edo now. It moves all over town. I'm going to go back to someone just so we keep this in focus. This is the planning meeting pretty much. Almost everything we're talking about, when we talk about incentives, I don't need money incentives. What we need is simplification incentives. It seems that all the, and it all has to do with public works, that all the ordinances that are out there for building and land development, it's a one size fits all. Everything is commercial. So when you go in there and do some simple little project, it becomes like you're building a skyscraper downtown. I had given Savita a couple of addresses. I had bought 8 lots in the Heights on a beautiful alleyway. And the city storm department says, oh, you have to put in brand new drain lines down the center of the alleyway, repave it, provide detention, yada, yada, yada. And it takes about a year to get those kind of permits. So I just said, the heck with it, I'm going to do front letters. I did not want to do front letters. And I was going to build a nice garage in the back where you can build on top and have a secondary dwelling unit, which we used to do a lot in the past. And again, I'll bring this up. In 2.5 years, they're going to have a hard time finding this. Not only a single permit has been issued on an alleyway in Houston, Texas in 2.5 years, because they just made it so complicated. And when we get down to it, it's all about commercial versus residential. And when these ordinances get done, they're done by engineers. They need to be getting some input from the public or builders, developers, somebody saying, hey, can we make it here's the residential requirements and here's commercial. We're not building a shopping center, we're building a single family home. And I love these ideas. Hey, all those units you have there, I've built one of those at one time in Houston. I'd love to continue doing that, but I'm just kind of being forced to build a certain style because it's the easiest way to get it through the permitting office. And again, I know that's not part of the perusal of this committee, but all these great ideas aren't going to work unless you have big buy-in from public works, where they say, hey, we're going to loosen up on this and not make you have blah, 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 a bunch of things that are required in massive projects. So, and also last comment, I have a builder friend who lives in California. We do not want to compare ourselves ever to California or what San Diego, San Francisco, anybody else is doing. They have $50,000, $60,000 impact fees, and they kind of force developers to say, you want to build 10 units, you got to build 10 affordable or something. I don't think that's the Houston or the Texas way. I think no zoning in Houston works because houses are being built where old commercial used to be. Most of my stuff I do is knock down warehouses in the middle of neighborhoods. And anyway, I just think we need to really focus on getting public works buy-in from specific department heads or the city engineer or someone to say, yeah, we're all on board with this and here's the things we can do. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I see Johanna Mahmoud. Johanna, are you there? You're muted. Go ahead. Johanna, your hand is up and you're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was having a hard time unmuting myself.
Go right ahead, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to address a little bit of the policy-wide and other partners doing, sort of all of us going in the same direction in terms of densification, et cetera. At Metro right now, we are looking at more of an internal exercise, but definitely moving forward would be more public exercise of looking at facilities where we have opportunities to provide housing closer to transit centers or within our own property, and then park and rides and such facilities. So, I mean, in general, we understand that there's a need for affordable housing. There's also a need for densification, and because transportation is such a basic need for people, we are looking at that. So I think that one of the concerns I think that Curtis Davis had brought up, are we doing all of this together? I mean, I sit in this committee, but I also bring back some of those ideas back to that. And I think that in the future, there will be definitely some alignment in some of the initiatives that we're talking about here. Definitely, permitting, et cetera, something very basic that we all need to agree on for facilitating that development. But I just wanted to bring that up, that we are on different levels. Definitely Metro is aligned with the mission here of looking at what alternatives and partners we have for affordable housing and densification.
Great, thank you so much. Committee members, any other comments or questions? All right, I don't see any hand raised. Let's continue forward. Colin, is that you?
Can I go ahead, sir?
Yes, we'll go right ahead. I thought it was Colin. I wasn't sure if it was you or Colin. Thank you. Go ahead,
Okay.
Savita.
So right now we will talk about recommendations for allowing multiple units on an unrestricted lot. So just to remind everyone and to reflect on the goal and the project goal again, it's to go back, please. Thank you. It's the purpose of Livable Places Action Committee is to create opportunities within our development standards that encourage housing variety and affordability. So we want to remember that as we think about the recommendations we make. Next slide, please. The problem statement that we're trying to address is to right-size the development regulations associated with infill development on properties not restricted to single-family residential use and promote naturally occurring affordable housing. The goals include to allow variety of home options, for example, duplex, triplex, fourplex, or any combinations of multiple units on unrestricted properties. Increased affordability by allowing these kind of structures, they give more opportunities and the varied price points. So that's how we can make opportunity for more affordable housing. Promote urban infill development. So allow smaller homes to be built is one of the goals. Encourage other transit modes to so the kind of development we encourage should also be supportive of the different modes of transit. So it's a two-way road. We encourage more housing, and that more housing will encourage more transit opportunities to become more viable, and we can have more opportunities and more transit routes can be in place. So those are our goals. Next slide, please. Before we move any further in the presentation, I want to draw a very clear distinction. When I say an unrestricted lot, I want everybody to understand this. That's why this is a repeat slide. You have seen this before. What is a single family residential lot and what is an unrestricted lot? So when you just look at a property, you will never know if the property is restricted to single family or not. Just because a home is built doesn't mean the property is restricted to single family or not. So I just wanted to emphasize that when there are any kind of single family restrictions, only 1 or 2 units are allowed on the property. And if a detached secondary unit is built in the back, that is referred to as an accessory dwelling unit or a secondary dwelling unit. And we are not talking about single family lots today. What we're talking about is what you see on your right side. It's unrestricted lots. That means there are no restrictions on the property on what can be built. So today the property can already be developed with multiple units. The change that we are discussing still is to not apply certain kind of multifamily regulations which make it harder to develop the property with the kind of development you're seeing on this picture. So the multiple units are already allowed today, and I want to emphasize that because it's not something that we are changing or we are allowing suddenly today. So just making sure. And these multiple units are not referred to as ADU or secondary dwelling unit because it's not secondary, there could be multiple. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And there could be attached, they could be all detached, or there could be a combination. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay, sounds like everybody understands. So moving on, next slide, please. Okay, here is an example of both of these are considered multifamily residential today. So in the image to the left, you see a duplex with a detached unit on the back. So because of the detached unit in the back, this will have to go to build that third unit in the back. This property owner would have gone through the multifamily regulations and have to meet the multifamily regulations. The image on the right is a fourplex. It doesn't probably look like a duplex. It's only 2 stories, but it's a fourplex with 4 units and the parking is in the back. And again, if somebody wants to build this today, it is considered multifamily. Next slide, please. And like I was saying, there could be different combinations of how you can allow multiple units on the property. And the first example, you see there is a triplex in the front and there could be a detached unit in the back, or all the 4 units could be stacked side by side or up and down. And that's one structure with 4 units. Or there could be 2 duplexes separated, which is the example in the bottom. And then further to the right, you see 4 bungalows. So that is also multiple units on one property. So that could also be done. So these are different combinations and there could be more combinations. So these are the kind of developments we are talking about, which are already allowed on unrestricted properties today. But then why are we talking about it, right? So we're talking about it because of the multifamily regulations that apply. And today, if you're building 4 units or 40 units, it's the same regulations. But is that the right thing to do? If we want to promote more small scale developments, small scale multifamily developments, it becomes harder to apply certain kind of restrictions. That's what we want to discuss. Next slide, please. So here is a flow diagram to show you how an unrestricted property could be developed. Is if somebody goes to permits office to build or 1 unit, it's considered single family and the permits are granted. So there are size restrictions of how much density they can be done, what should be the square footage of the property, and what is the parking requirement. That's the bottom row. The top row shows you that anything that is built with 3 or more units, if the density is more than 30 dwelling units per acre, as long as the fire review is complied and the fire hydrant locations and the fire lanes are available within the development, then that project can go forward. If the density is less than 30 dwelling units per acre, there is a requirement of a 28-foot private street. And that is what makes it very hard for the type of developments that I was showing images of, because in all those examples, the density of the development was less than 30 dwelling units. Even though it's only 2 or 3 units on the property, still they have to provide a 28-foot private street, though the property has frontage on public street for firefighting purposes. And the parking requirements are across the board for any size of multifamily development. The parking requirements are what you see on the screen. So those are some of the challenges that we discussed in the past. So the concept that we went to, go back, next slide, please. So in this, the concept is to create an intermediate category between, so we saw that there is very clear distinction, right, from single family to multifamily. Now we want to create an in-between, which takes the advantage of both the single family regulations and the benefits of the multifamily regulations. And we want to keep it small, so it's only for 3 to 8 unit size developments, and that's why it's called multi-unit residential. We want to still call it residential, but it's multiple units. and we want to keep it small, but we want to create some kind of performance standards which will help the development of these small scale multifamily easy. Next slide, please. These are the prototypes that committee members you have looked at before, in showing how the different, is it even possible to build multiple units on a typical 5,000 square feet lot is one of the questions that was posed. So these were prototypes that we built to show that it is possible to develop these properties with the kind of recommendations that we are going to propose. Next slide, please. So what are the recommendations? So here we are. So 3 to 8 units will be considered as residential, and this is a performance standard. So it is not that all developments have to follow these regulations. If somebody still wants to develop under the multifamily regulations, it is possible, and that can be done. But if these conditions are met, these are called the performance standards, and all of these conditions have to be met for someone to develop the property into what we are discussing today. The first thing is the maximum site size should be 15,000 square feet. There should be at least 3 units on the property. The properties must meet all codes. The code compliant qualify as residential. So I'm sure all of you are aware that there is something called IRC and IBC, and if the development complies with the IRC, only then these rules will apply. So the development proposal should meet the code. We are in discussions with our public works officials, and we're discussing some amendments in future for code amendments, but that is not there today, and that is not part of the committee's scope. 28-foot private street requirement is one of the big hurdles in developing these kind of properties. And because the property will have only a certain depth of no more than 150 feet deep, the firefighting can happen from the street, and therefore that 28-foot private street is not required. 5 feet space around the buildings is a requirement in case of an emergency for the fire officials, fire staff to go ahead and fight the fire. So there must be a clear walkable path around the buildings for firefighting purposes. Maximum 60% building coverage. This is one of the requirements that we would like to make sure that there is breathing room, there is green space available around the properties, and no more than 2 to 3 stories with a total height of 30 feet. So we want to make sure that these are not tall structures we are talking about. We are talking about neighborhood style that fit within the neighborhood characters. So it's 2 to 3 stories maximum. And there must be green space or permeable area maintained. Certain percentage of the site has to be green. Next slide, please. The front building line will be 10 feet with pedestrian connections to the sidewalk, and the buildings that face the street must be fronting on the street. They must face the street, and the parking will be in the back. 1 parking space per unit for units less than 1,000 square feet, regardless of the number of bedrooms. So in previous slide, you have seen that the parking for multifamily buildings is based on the number of bedrooms, but the recommendation is we want to change that, and we want to, only for these performance standards, we want to make sure the parking is based on the number of units, and the unit sizes have to be less than 1,000 square feet. No parking minimum if it is within quarter mile of rail, high frequency bus, boost, or transit stations, and close to park and rides. And if it is along high comfort bike paths, then there is no parking minimum. That does not mean that the developers cannot provide parking. It is up to the developers to choose how much parking they would like to put in based on the market. Off-site parking is allowed. So this is in today for multifamily developments, off-site parking is allowed. So we will continue to incorporate that. Is the parking doesn't have to be on site, it could be off site. Guest parking, so for 6 units or more, for every 6 units, there will be 1 additional guest parking required. And there will be incentives will be proposed for existing dwelling units. So if there are any existing dwelling units that the developer is keeping, then I think there should be an incentive for incentive of reduced parking for those situations. Driveway width of 12 feet with 4 feet curb radius. Like I mentioned, the parking will be in the back. And so for the cars to go in the back, the driveway width is 12 feet with 4 feet radius. So these are the recommendations that we're proposing as part of the performance standards. And if any of these conditions is not met, then the multifamily requirements will automatically apply. With that, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just the flow diagram to show that how we are creating an in-between category, and we are naming it multi-unit residential. You can also comment on the name if you don't like it. But anything more than 9 units will be called multifamily residential, and the regular multifamily regulations, what exists today, will apply. So this is a flow diagram to depict the same. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are ready for questions.
All right. So who do we have first?
Scott Cooper had his hand raised during the presentation, but then he lowered it, so I'm not sure if he wanted to speak.
All right, Scott, are you there? All right, we're going to go Scott, then Davis, or correct me if
Curtis
I'm wrong.
Davis, and then Peter Friedman.
All right, Curtis, go ahead. We'll catch back up.
Can we do the previous slide, please? The first recommendation slide.
Yeah, going back to the concept, to support Mike Dishberger's concern, which I share, about facilitating permitting and dealing with public works, is it practical to consider a special interdisciplinary review unit for this proposed residential 3 to 8 unit permitting process? And that unit would be supported with every possible technology and tool to expedite quality reviews in timetables that would facilitate higher production rates for this type of development. And certainly the developers in the committee and in the community in general could speak to this, but it would also require some consultation between the director and her colleagues as to whether or not it would be feasible to put together a special unit to just really explore how to make this happen more quickly than the normal review process, and to help educate all of the reviewers on how to facilitate this type of process.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let's go on to Peter Friedman. Peter, are you there?
I'm here. I had a couple questions about some of the standards. On the 5 foot around the building, how does that work on side setbacks? Is that specifically between the buildings we're talking about, or are you creating a different standard on a side setback where you have to have 5 feet of walkable space, where right now that's not the standard?
I hear someone else talking.
Yeah, make sure you're all muted so that we can continue the meeting.
Okay, so
right,
in discussions with fire department fire has informed us that to help fight the fire, there is a requirement of 5 feet that is needed around the buildings to go in the back. So that 5 feet is something that we are requiring as part of the performance standards.
Okay, I'm not really sure I understand where they're coming from. I'd love to hear a little bit more about why they think 5 feet is needed over 4 feet or 3 feet. The reason I ask is with the new standards that just went into place, we have the ability to go to 3 feet with fire standards up to an hour. But in reality, what happens is you have your walls and then you have your overhang of your roof. So that doesn't interfere with the walking space, but realistically, 4 feet, 3.5 feet should be enough room to get around. But the other question I had was on the driveways. The 12-foot driveway, I understand they want to keep that standard with single family how it is now. But if you're trying to make a footprint of a building and utilize the best space possible, shrinking that down as you maybe go past the front building would make travel a lot easier. So I don't know what the best number would be on that, but I know looking at if you have a single-story house with a bigger footprint and maybe a 2-story in the back to get there, sometimes it's easier if you have maybe a 10-foot driveway or an 8-foot driveway, at least along the building, and then it can widen back out. But everything else looks good. I like the concept. The only thing I would say is if we could just make this the single family standard instead of creating a new one, that might fast track this. But I love where you guys are going with this. Thank you.
All right, thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Chair,
Yes.
may I address the comment
Please.
about the 12 feet? So
Go
the
right
12
ahead, please.
feet requirement is the width of the driveway opening along where the street and the property meet. But once you have that opening within your property, you are able to reduce the size. How much low can we go to 8 or 10 is still under discussion. But the 12 feet was worked on with Public Works. So that's the proposal, but we can ask and see if that can go down. Right now, the minimum for residential is 12 feet.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I jump back in real quick?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Did you say you are allowed to shrink down below the 12 feet once you enter the property, or is that you say that is something that's in consideration?
It is under consideration, so we are discussing that. And I think it's possible. I'm not gonna say it on the meeting that it is possible today, but we are under discussion.
Okay.
Savita, this is Richard Smith. I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
Sorry, I've got about 5 things going on, but I did hear your question. So going less than 12 foot, the 12-foot requirement is from the street to the property line. That is the driveway, what we call a driveway approach. So that is required to be 12 foot. After the driveway approach ends, so from the property line into the property, we don't have a say in how wide that driveway is. So if you wanted to take it down to a 10-foot driveway, that's flat work inside the property. That's not within our jurisdiction on a residential.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. Is that also with current single family rules?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If it's not commercial, that would be our.
Yeah. So we would want this to be applied to single family and to do the new designation, the multi-unit residential, Savita.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard, for clarifying that for me.
Yeah. All right. I had Scott Kubler at the beginning. Scott, did you need to speak?
No, that was me trying to make sure my hand wasn't raised. Sorry.
Okay, that's good. Who else? I show we've got a couple more speakers.
Mike Dishberger and then Tyrone McDaniel.
All right, Mr. Dishberger and then Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, thank you. I think these are great ideas, and Richard did explain the 12 foot. So the word driveway is probably not the right term. It probably should say intern.
Yeah.
And I agree. We had talked, you know, there's a lot of residents in Houston that have an 8-foot wide driveway. That's probably the minimum you need, 8 foot for a car width and everything, or a truck. But anything below 12 would be nice. And I really think this is a great step in the right direction to allow us to build and put more units on a property, and they can be more affordable because won't be an apartment complex. It'll be cottages. I mean, my mind already spins on all some of the ideas I have, what I could do with these kind of rules. And in a lot of parts of town, this would fit perfectly. So I'm all in favor of it, and let's keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. McDaniel, you're next. Go ahead.
Okay, great. And I just like Mike, you know, I agree that these are definitely some proactive steps that would truly benefit us. For one, again, this is a space, you know, being able to have a property still be considered residential, which aligns with how financing is. Anything 4 units or less is considered residential. So if we could align our permitting process to facilitate that, that will be huge towards affordability. It will make it easier for people to afford in nicer areas where they need another unit to be able to subsidize their ability to live there. And then you couple that with some of the parking requirements. And if you had, you know, the driveway width is huge. The 1,000 square foot for one parking space is huge. And so I love where we're going with this, and this designation of making these residential, I think, would be a huge step in making our city more affordable and equitable.
All right, thank you. I'm now going to go to Sandy Stevens. Sandy, we're on a roll. Don't mess it up for me.
I'll try not to. No.
Go ahead, please.
I apologize. I got to the meeting late today, very late. And so if this has already been addressed, I'm good with that. But the thing that, of course, pops to my mind is, and because I did prepare for the meeting, though I didn't get here, is the allowance of up to 8 units. And in my neighborhood, most of the properties are within a 1/4 mile of transit, and therefore we could have 8 units and no parking spaces required for those, meaning all of the, and I understand that, you know, we're a changing society, but we still, where I live, mostly need a car to get to a grocery store. So most everyone has a car here. So you're putting 8 streets on, I'm sorry, 8 cars on our streets where we already have significant parking issues as it is because of the destination that we are. You know, we're already part of a community parking plan to try to address the parking problems that we have here. There are actually 2 of them within this one tiny little neighborhood. So that's a concern for me as a resident. Overall, I mean, I do love the plan. I do have significant concerns about you know, allowing sort of a free-for-all on the street parking.
Thank you, Sandy. I think that's something that we need to address. You know, the thing that we've all discussed that we're afraid of is unintended consequences. Sure. So we want to make sure, and like I said, and we those of us in planning know that, you know, you make sometimes you make the rules for the bad actors. Everyone knows you should have some parking. That's going to make for a better property. But again, we're not making the rules for those people. We're making it for those who are going to try and get by on the bare minimum. So I'm sure we'll take a second look at that, because again, like you said, there are areas where this, you know, broad brushstrokes, this may not work. So we'll certainly take a second look at that, because again, we want to avoid unintended consequences. I don't show anyone else with their hands up. Is there anyone else who wanted to address the subcommittee? All right, Suvita.
Oh, Mr.
Yes,
Cullen.
sir.
I think, wait, was there someone have a question? Okay, Suvita, we can go ahead then.
I heard, I think Tammy Williamson say something.
Tammy?
But I don't think this is a committee member.
Okay, yeah, if you want to speak and you're not a committee member, please put your information, your name in the chat, and we'll call you during the public comment at the end. All right, if there's no one else, Suvita, we can go ahead and go on forward.
You want to If we want to proceed, then the next item on the agenda is to talk about homework activities.
Yeah, that would be Lynn.
Thank you,
Thank
Savita.
you. Thank you.
And good afternoon, Co-Chair Garza and committee members. We've posted the report entitled Diversifying Housing Options with Smaller Lots and Smaller Homes on letstalkhouston.org. This report is produced by the National Association of Home Builders and prepared by Opticos Design, Inc. The objective of the report is to explore, quote, issues involved in building a greater mix of housing types that bring discrete density to neighborhoods using a palette of ranges from smaller homes to accessory dwelling units to missing middle housing types, unquote. The report also examines regulatory and design options, as well as barriers that prevent these housing types. The analysis provides examples of not only codes, but also explanations and images of built environment. The examples included were developed at, quote, the market rate without expectation of subsidies, so that we could understand how successful a code can be in influencing diversity and affordability of housing options, unquote. Also included on letstalkhouston.org is an article by the Kinder Institute for Urban Research, who published, Houston hopes more homeowners will embrace housing literally in their backyard. In this article, senior editor and writer Matt Doolin discusses accessory dwelling units, what they are, how they can help meet the needs of a variety of individuals, and more. He also interviewed Adam Berman and Shaban Finley, the winners of the ADU design competition held by the Planning Department. Also on letstalkhouston.org are the survey results. In July 2021, the Planning Department's Livable Places Action Committee shared the single-family residential survey. More than 1,200 responses were garnered, and the Planning Department has prepared a summary of the results from the survey and included it on the website. To read through the summary, click on the PDF located in the right sidebar of the site. You'll find it in the Documents section. To view the two articles mentioned, you can see them on letstalkhouston.org/livable-places in the Articles tab below the bar. If you'd like more information about the ADU competition, you can find them on letstalkhouston.org/ADU. And unless there are questions, I can turn it back over to Savita Bandy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Savita.
Yes, sir. If there are no questions, then the next item on the agenda is public comments, and the next meeting is on February 8th. The next meeting will be February 8th, 3 to 5 p.m. And if anyone is interested to provide or have questions or have thoughts that they would like to share, please email to livableplaces@houstontx.gov. And we're ready for public comments at this time.
Right then, who do we have signed up in the chat to speak during public comment?
Good afternoon. The first speaker I have is George Frey, F-R-E-Y.
Mr. Frey, are you there?
Hi, yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go right ahead, please.
Okay. Had a couple questions. My first one is about the high density single family needs that Colin mentioned. And you went through infrastructure, outdoor spaces, cultural facilities, all sorts of these things. The problem that we see, we're talking a lot about these smaller lots that are under 15,000 square feet, but in my area, there's a lot of unrestricted lots that are significantly larger. And those unrestricted lots are now being turned into high density single family houses that are coming in just barely below the cutoffs that were mentioned below. The community has expressed significant concern about the lack of these needs, but the Public Works is still in review of these things, saying that there's going to be a concern, and the issues that were brought up about 28-foot driveways, fire trucks not having access, just become that much more problematic when you go into multi-acre sites that are trying to shove in that many single-family houses. For a community that really wanted the density and actually wanted more of the amenities, since we live in a food desert, we're looking for more guidance or more of a perspective on those larger lots that really require some citywide planning, especially planning and Public Works. Second question was around the highway capacity manual, pedestrian level of safety, just something that wasn't brought up today, but something else that I know a lot of other communities are moving away from the highway capacity manual to dictate pedestrian safety, but Houston is still using that as all of our intersections. I'd like to understand if there's a plan going forward to look at other methodologies to better evaluate more from a pedestrian perspective, not so much trying to get more traffic through. And then, okay, just highlighting that I asked a bunch of questions at the last time, and thank you, Savita, for trying to answer them, but you did mention that there'd be a follow-up. So if it's possible that we can get more of the community engagement shared publicly.
All right, thank you, Mr. Frey. Savita, did you want to respond at all, or the department at this point?
Yes, I had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Frey, and some of the concerns that were brought up were about larger sites. And today we are only discussing sizes up to 15,000 square feet, but we are in future also going to talk about opportunities for single family lots and what kind of developments and standards that we will be making recommendations on. So please keep tuned in with the work that we're doing. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Please reach out to me.
All right. Who's our next speaker? I show Ricky Cardenas. Ricky Cardenas. Is there anyone else who is not listed in the chat who wants to address the subcommittee?
Mr.
Yeah, who's speaking?
This is Tamara with planning.
Oh yeah, Tamara.
Yeah, so the next speaker I have signed up is Kevin Strickland, STRCKLAN.
Yes, so Mr. Strickland, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, sir.
Hi there. I've been following y'all's work for a couple of years now, particularly walkable places, and now this initiative. So I'm probably not the average Yahoo who pops up to bug you. I've got an item that I'm hoping to get your attention on. Before I do that, I wanted to bring up the noise ordinance again. I was on last night's call. The mayor was more than a little defensive about the noise ordinance and pointed out repeatedly that it's because we have zoning. I think until we reframe that issue, we're constantly going to be batting it back and forth. The problem with the way the issue is framed is because we don't have zoning, we translate that into businesses have a unilateral and unlimited right to take the public space. And I heard Scott talk about that briefly, and I think that's really important. So until we reframe the discussion to say that we all own the public space and businesses don't have a right to claim it, we're not going to be able to make any progress on that. Alcorn did hear all of the discussion and committed to revisiting it. All right, now to what I was really hoping to talk about today. In the work that y'all are doing, I would ask that you focus on centering people and not cars. When we talk about compact development, a lot of what's drives the discussion is around getting people to their houses by cars, and that will always get us in trouble. The stuff that Walkable Places did and Livable Places doing is tinkering at the edges of the change we need to make. The reason I say that is 50% of Houston is unwalkable. I've been watching this space for a couple of years now, and I don't see anybody, any large organization addressing how do we fix that problem. There's nothing that's happening to backfill the changes we need to close that 50% unwalkable gap. And I'll give you a couple of specific examples, and I would challenge.
Mr. Strickland, before you go forward, Tam, did I hear you say the 2 minutes were up?
Yes.
Okay. Could Mr. Strickland, we have just a rule of 2 minutes for public speaker. Could you wrap up, please?
Yeah, I would challenge in the work that you're doing to look at the blocked right-of-ways, broken sidewalks, and in particular, the sidewalk exception policy, which already for 21 has generated hundreds of sidewalk exceptions. And until we address those issues, we're never going to get to walkability, livability, and to the compact housing that y'all are working on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right. Our next speaker. Hello, Tam, are you there?
Yeah, I don't have anyone else signed up.
All right, I show, let me see here. No, I had a Ricky Cardenas, but not as a request to speak. All right, is there anyone else who is with us in this meeting today who wanted to address the subcommittee? All right then. All right, so subcommittee, we have our homework per Lynn. You've seen the presentation through Savita and Colin. The director, Margaret Wallace-Brown, thank you so much for your comments and all of this. You're seeing on the screen right now the information that you need should you have more questions. Again, you can put things in the chat very quickly before we close this meeting should you want staff to reach out to you. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming today to Livable Places. We appreciate your work and your input very, very much. The entire city is a stakeholder in what we're doing here today. And I think we've made a lot of progress, but as we all know, there's still more to come and more to go through. So again, thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it very much. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, honey.
Thanks, Mr. Garza.
Thank you.
Thank you.